What's your weirdest ghost story? I'll go first. So this was when I was at 14, I believe, and my parents rented their friend's cottage for the week just so we could like all be together as a family for my birthday. It was like a 1-level house. My room was the only room facing the driveway, and it was a very long driveway. It was in like the middle of nowhere, and so I have really bad anxiety staying anywhere, so I was just always uneasy. Like this house I went into, it was just, I felt so uneasy going into. And little backstory, like my Nana, me, and I think her grandmother and my brother all see like spirits to a degree. So this was like my first like really like counter where I was like, oh, I believe now. Like I was like, oh my God, I thought ghosts were like not real until this happened to me. So I was going to bed. I checked the screen because I was going to keep the window open because there wasn't really any AC. It was really buggy. It was in the middle of summer. So I kept the screen. I checked the screen that it was locked because you know how like screens, they have the tabs, and it's from the inside that you can pull it in, right? So I had the window open. I checked the screen and I went to bed. I woke up in the middle of the night because I heard something. I look outside. There is probably like 10 to 15 people. And I was really freaked out. And then I was like staring at them for a few minutes, and I realized that they were like translucent. There was a little boy, probably 5 or 6. He had a red shirt, like a red t-shirt on. He had long jean shorts, and he was dribbling a basketball, this little kid. And it was like he would show up, and then like in the same line that he would disappear and then show up. And then I remember seeing, I don't remember any of the other people, what they looked like, because I just specifically saw these 2 people and got really freaked out. And there was an older man. It was all people of different timelines. There was this older man from, like, the clothes he was wearing would be from, like, the 1900s kind of thing. Like, he was wearing all black, except his skin was, like, purely white. Like, it was, like, paper. And he had, like, a black brimmed hat on. And he was, like, very translucent to the point where I would, like, see him and, like, he would show up and then disappear and then show up, like, walking. And they were all, like, kind of walking this big circle, like, just, like, not going outside of it. Like, they were just kind of, I don't know. And so it freaked me out so bad. I was like, okay, I just woke up. Like, I'm probably just imagining this. So I then closed and locked the window, and I had this like expanding like fidget toy like ball thing that was like plastic, and it had like these little spikes, so I grabbed that because I was too scared, and I just thought that I was like imagining it, so I didn't want to go wake up my parents. And I put my phone up next to me. I wake up in the morning. The screen that I checked, that is you take out from the inside of the house, it just had the 2 tabs on the bottom connecting, and it was completely bent over, like literally almost into the bushes. It just had the 2 tabs at the bottom, and literally like someone like ripped it out and like bent it fully. And I was so terrified that I couldn't even sleep in that room for the time we were there. I literally slept on this uncomfortable couch, like old couch, for the rest of the time that we were there because it terrified me so much. My parents have never really had their own experiences like that. And so after that, they believed me because I was so terrified, and like I would have just like chalked it up to, oh, I was probably just imagining it. If it wasn't for the screen being bent in half, like it absolutely, just the fact that it's like something could have gone me if I didn't wake up and see and hear and see those people, that like, oh, I don't know how that would have been ripped out like that, you know. And it wasn't like ripped to shreds, like it wasn't like an animal, it was still completely intact, just the entire like metal frame was bent over. Yeah.
Me and my daughter saw something completely awful today. We saw evil in a house we were cleaning. We saw a demon, and I know that sounds completely crazy, and I feel like I'm crazy, but like we both experienced it. It was 2 of us that had it happen, so I can't be crazy, right? Things were weird from the moment we got to the house. We were taking in multiple loads, and my daughter ran back out to the car, and I was going in by myself, and the temperature dropped out, and it got really cold, like so cold that I was like, oh, I'm cold. And I looked over because I saw something out of the corner of my eye, and it looked like a woman was walking through the living room, like a shadow woman, and she went straight through the back doors. I don't acknowledge things like that, so I don't let it get me scared. I just pray. I know I have God, so I said a prayer, and I turned the heat up, and I acted like it didn't happen. We go on cleaning. Things are okay. I didn't know that she was having experiences too because she didn't tell me, and I didn't tell her what was happening to me either. So before we leave, I have these 2 back bedrooms to clean. So I do the first one and everything's fine. I go to the second one and I'm in there sweeping and I feel someone walk up behind me. Like I felt cold push at me. I kind of froze and then it yelled, "Fuck," really loud onto the back of my neck. And you know what's even creepier? It said it in my voice. So my daughter, who is 100 feet away, says, "Mom, are you okay?" Thinking I got hurt or something. And I was like, "That wasn't me." And she's like, "What do you mean that wasn't you?" And I was like, "It wasn't me." So I turn around because I'm not gonna take my eyes off whatever is behind me at this point. And I'm trying to back away, and that's when I saw it. I've seen shadow people before, but you know, you see them out of the corner of your eye and then they disappear. This isn't what happened. It was behind me, and when I saw it, it had really long limbs, long fingers, and it had breasts like it was a woman, but it wasn't. And then it didn't have a face, and people always say that they don't have a face, but like I don't even know how to describe what I saw except it had no face. I'm a Christian. I believe in God, and I was praying, like, make it leave us alone, because I go back out in the living room. My daughter tells me that she's seen things out of the corner of her eye the whole time we've been there, and she tells me where she saw it, and she tells me what it looked like, and it was exactly what I've been seeing. I just didn't get a good look at it the first time I saw it. We both started to feel really sick to our stomachs, so we just hurried up and grabbed our stuff to get out of there. And the whole time we were playing Christian music and praying for it to leave us alone. We were freezing cold. We felt like we were gonna throw up the whole time. I can legitimately say that I met evil today. I keep seeing videos of people saying that the veil is thinning, and I wonder if that's why I saw what I saw. But I also just want to know if anybody else has seen this. Has anybody else seen that thing?
She wasn't human. Welcome back to the series where I tell true horror experiences submitted by you, the viewers. Today's story is submitted by viewer Sashin. Thank you so much for submitting your story. If there's one thing we've learned from this experience, it's to be wary when speaking to strangers, especially late at night. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. Today's experience takes place in Asia, where we're going back to the Philippines. Every year, around Christmas time, I travelled to visit my grandparents who lived in a small kampong in Macabiko. This incident happened on the second day of our visit, December the 17th. With Christmas rapidly approaching, many people in the village stayed awake way into the night, a direct result of the festivities. But that day in particular, it was notably quiet. For some context, the kampong consisted of a long road. On one side lay dense forest, the other rows of houses, of which included my grandparents' home. At night, the roads were almost complete darkness, besides a handful of street lamps scattered quite far apart, leaving these long stretches of darkness between them. It must have been around 10 p.m. when me and my family were sitting in the backyard. We were enjoying the cool night's air and each other's company, when we suddenly heard a knock on the front fence. My mother asked me and my 2 cousins to go and check who it was, so when we arrived at the fence, we opened it, revealing an elderly woman standing outside. She explained in a soft voice that she was selling chicharron, a crispy fried pork rind snack, and was wondering if we would like to buy any. I was quite hungry, so I sent my 2 cousins to go to my mother to ask for money while I stayed and kept her company. As we spoke, this uneasy feeling crept over me. I couldn't quite explain it at first, but sometimes your body just knows. Well, first off, she was standing incredibly still, no mannerisms at all. In fact, now that I mention it, the dim light from the street lamps made it almost impossible to see her face. She was wearing this long gown, which almost reached to the bottom of the floor, hiding most of her body, with only the lower part of her legs being visible beneath the fabric. The longer I stood there, the more utterly uncomfortable I felt. And then suddenly, with excellent timing, my phone buzzed. As I reached into my pocket, pulling it out, it must have been the slight shake of my body, and the phone slipped from my hand, crashing against the pavement below. As I bent down to pick up my phone, my eyes landed on the woman's feet. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. where her feet should have been were instead black, splitted hooves. Goats' hooves. A cold chill shot through my body. Every arm on my hair instantaneously stood up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But in that moment, I remembered something my mother had told me years ago. If I ever encountered something strange, I should always remain calm and never show any sign of fear. I forced myself to remain calm, slowly picking up my phone and standing upright. When I looked back towards the woman, I noticed something I didn't see before. Her face was mostly covered by dark cloth, with only her eyes visible. They didn't blink, just staring, fixated on me, watching. Did she know? Moments later, my cousins returned with the money. Just as they were about to hand it over, I quickly stopped them. Trying to remain calm and casual, I made up an excuse, saying that I just remembered that we had plenty of chicharron at home and we didn't need any. The woman said nothing. For what probably felt like the longest 10 seconds of my life, she stared at me. I couldn't help but notice that the entire street had gone silent. No dogs barking, no insects, nothing. Just her blank eyes aimed at mine. And then finally, she spoke. Okay. Her voice sounded different this time. Lower, colder. And then just like that, she turned and walked away. I watched for a while as she walked down the street, eventually disappearing into the darkness. As I explained what had happened to my mother, her expression quickly transitioned from attentive to concerned. She told me to instantly wash my head with water, just in case the woman had placed a bad omen onto me. And then afterwards told me to never think of it again. I did try to listen. I did, but I can't help it, you know. Years later, I can still picture the woman's eyes staring into mine. And I can't help but wonder that had I not have noticed when I did, what might have happened had we bought the chicharron.
I was hunted last night. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a blanket and get cozy because it's creepy cozy time at the Creepy Cozy Cottage. Say that 10 times fast. I'm still shaking while writing this, but I'm posting it as a warning to anyone walking alone at night, and honestly as a reminder to trust your gut no matter what. 2 nights ago, I was walking by myself in downtown Long Beach. If you know the area, I was walking from the Pike to the Westin Hotel parking structure to get my car. The walk itself is 10 minutes. To give you some context, usually I am completely oblivious when I walk. I love walking and I love being by the beach. I always wear my headphones with my music blasting, and I'm totally in my own world. I also usually wear heels when I dress up, but because of how far the parking lot was, I decided at the last second to wear flat shoes. That single decision and the fact that I left my headphones off probably saved my life. I was about a block away from my car, crossing the street, when I noticed a man, ranging from maybe a few years older to 10 years older than me. He was watching me. He crossed halfway into the street, but then abruptly doubled back to the exact same block I was on. I made a left turn at the corner. He went straight. I continued walking for a while. I was close to nearing the edge of the block when I turned around, and I realized that the same man that doubled back was walking in the same direction as me, all the way down at the end of the block, and I started to panic. I tried to duck into an entrance to get off the street, but couldn't find my ticket in my purse, and even if I had, there was no way to get in. I was trapped outside. I kept walking and looking back. He had made a left and was closing the distance. Up ahead, I saw 3 girls who looked like they were headed to a club. I didn't think twice. I just forced myself into their group and started walking with them. 4 of us, 1 of him. I pulled out my phone and called the police because at this point he had crossed the street and was right behind us. He still kept following us. He made a left turn. The second we had a chance, the girls and I literally sprinted sideways across the crosswalk so he couldn't catch up before the light changed. There was a bar right ahead and we ran inside screaming for help. When the man walked past the bar, he didn't even look at me. He just kept walking straight like he hadn't just spent the last few blocks hunting me down. The absolute second the isolation and privacy were stripped away, he acted like nothing happened. I made it home safe and unharmed because of those 3 amazing girls and because I had happened to have flats, shoes on, and no headphones. If I had been at my usual baseline, buzzed, deaf to my surroundings, and unable to run in heels, I don't even want to think about what he would have done to me when I got stuck at that locked entrance. Please, please always trust your instincts. If someone feels like they are tracking you, they are. Don't worry about being polite. Make a scene, find a crowd, and don't stop running until you're safe.
I don't know why I keep doing this to myself. I keep recording ghost videos in the middle of the night. I don't know if I'm freaking myself out, but I keep hearing things. So anyways, let's talk about the ghost of the Jerome Surgeon House. Welcome to my series, Haunted US, where we're exploring the ghost mysteries and cryptids of every state. Today we are in Jerome, Arizona. This house was built in 1917 for Jerome's chief of surgery at the time. It used to be part of the old hospital, which had damage during a mine explosion, and ended up being that they started building a bigger hospital and kind of connected to it, is where the nurses ended up living after that time. In 1930, a new surgeon moved in. His name was Dr. Arthur Carlson, and some believe that he's still there. It's now a bed and breakfast. Many people report seeing the ghost of a man in a suit with a black doctor's bag. And they see the same man in his PJs in the bedroom. Others report seeing a couple that dances at night, a former maid, Alice, a woman in blue, chasing after the doctor, laughing through the hallways. This building is said to be charged similar to the hotel, but from what I'm seeing is it may actually be a little bit more lighthearted. So I would love to know if any of you have stayed there and what you experienced there, what kind of vibes you were picking up. I hear that they have about 4 rooms. I actually have been sold by one of you to try to stay there, and I hear just the best things about this place. So make sure to check it out, and if you do, keep me updated. If you like videos like this, make sure to like, follow, share, and comment what state you want to see next.
Sam Raimi grew up hearing stories from his older cousins about a book in the Appalachian Mountains that drove the man who found it to chop off his own hand to stop himself from reading it again. The Appalachian folk tradition, older than the United States, brought over by Scots-Irish settlers in the 1700s who mixed their own pagan beliefs with the isolation of the mountains. Cabins built 20 miles from the nearest neighbour, winters that lasted 6 fucking months, families that didn't see another human being from October to April. The folklore is fucking full of cursed objects, specifically cursed books. The settlers brought grimoires from the old country, hand-copied manuscripts of spells and rituals from medieval Europe. These books were supposed to have been burnt by the church. Some survived, some made it across the Atlantic in the false bottoms of trunks. Some ended up buried in the woods of West Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee when their owners died or went fucking mad. The pattern in the folk stories are identical to the plot of Evil Dead. A man finds the book on his land while digging a well or clearing a field, brings it inside. He reads from it because he's curious and bored. The reading invites something into the cabin. The something doesn't enter through the door, it enters through the man. There are 47 documented cases in the Foxfire Archives, which is real folklore preservation projects that collected oral histories from Appalachian Mountains in the 1960s and 70s. The cases are remarkably fucking consistent. The man becomes someone else. His family notices first. His voice changes. He stops eating. He laughs at things that aren't funny. He stares at the wall for hours. In about half the cases, the family burns the cabin down with the fucking man inside. In the other half, the man kills the family first. Raimi took details from one specific case. Hawkins County, Tennessee, 1923. A farmer named Elias Birch found a leather-bound book in a hollow stump while clearing land. He brought it home. Within a week, his wife found him in the cellar trying to bite his own hand off. Not chopped, bite. He'd already taken off 2 fucking fingers. He told her his hand had been reading the book without his permission. He told her it had to come off before it learned more. She locked him in the cellar. She wrote to her sister in Knoxville for help. By the time her sister arrived, the cabin was empty. The cellar door was open, Elias was gone, and the book was gone. She lived another 60 years. She never said what she'd seen in the cellar when she opened the door. The Foxfire interview asked her in 1971. She just shook her fucking head and held up her left hand. It was missing 2 fingers. She never explained when she lost them.
In May of 1826, a 15-year-old girl was on her honeymoon in Calais when 5 men burst into her hotel room. One of them was her new husband, a 30-year-old Englishman named Edward Gibbon Wakefield, whom she had married only weeks before. The other men the girl was surprised to see were her father, her uncle, the family solicitor, and a police officer, all anxiously demanding to know whether she was all right. If you'd asked the newlywed teenager in that moment whether she had been abducted, she might have confusedly answered in the negative. But Ellen Turner had most assuredly been abducted by the very man who now called himself her husband. As for Edward Gibbon Wakefield, well, he didn't see why everyone was making such a big fuss. Welcome back to Toxic AF. Before we get to the kerfuffle that became known as the Shrigley abduction, I need to establish that what Edward Wakefield did to Ellen Turner in 1826 was not a one-off. It was not the case of a desperate man making a single catastrophic decision. It was a man who, in his mind, was following a replicable business model. We know this because he had already done it once before. 10 years earlier, in 1816, a then 20-year-old Edward Wakefield had eloped to Scotland with a wealthy 16-year-old heiress named Eliza Paddle. Eliza was a ward in Chancery, meaning she was a minor whose financial affairs were administered by the court. And eloping with her was technically illegal, but the Paddle family decided to roll with it. It's a testament to Wakefield's prodigious charm that he managed not only to placate his enraged new in-laws and to persuade the Lord Chancellor to consent to the union, he also somehow managed to achieve one of the most generous chancery settlements ever made to the husband of one of its wards. Rather than being punished for illegally eloping with a minor, Wakefield's misadventure ended with a marriage settlement of £70,000, which in 1816 was a genuinely enormous fortune. And surprisingly, the marriage actually proved to be a happy one. But the Wakefield's idyllic domesticity was shattered after only 4 years, when Eliza died of complications from childbirth in 1820. Edward was distraught, genuinely over the loss of his wife, but also just as likely over his now reduced income. You see, by this point, our roguish protagonist had developed expensive tastes and certain political ambitions. He wanted an estate of his own and a position in Parliament, but this would require additional capital, and that's when he had an idea. The first heiress acquisition had gone so well, perhaps the answer was simply to do it again. By 1825, Edward had settled on his new target, a 15-year-old schoolgirl named Ellen Turner. Ellen was the only child of William Turner, a wealthy calico printer and the High Sheriff of Cheshire. Wakefield had never met her. Yep, that's right. The two had never even met. Literally never even so much as crossed paths. As Wakefield would later admit, it was only through the free-flowing gossip in the back rooms of polite society that he had learned of the wealthy young heiress in Cheshire. Edward enlisted accomplices to help him execute his nefarious plot, including his younger brother William, his stepmother Frances Wakefield, and his French manservant. The plan itself was a masterclass in delusional overconfidence. Ellen was attending boarding school in Liverpool at the time, and so Wakefield sent his manservant to the headmistress bearing a forged letter from a Dr. John Ainsworth. Writing as the fictional physician, Wakefield delivered the alarming news that Ellen's mother had suffered a sudden, deadly attack of paralysis, and that Ellen must leave school immediately to come home. The headmistress had no reason to doubt the letter or its bearer, who was clearly respectable and had arrived in a very fine carriage to collect Ellen. And as Ellen herself was now anxious to return home to her dying mother, she was soon bustled into the carriage and on her way. Reaching Manchester, they stopped at an inn, supposedly to meet Mr. Turner, who would then escort his daughter the rest of the way home. Instead, Ellen was startled when a dashing, well-dressed stranger entered her room. Edward Wakefield introduced himself and informed her that there had been a change of plans. Mr. Turner could not meet her in Manchester. In fact, the situation was much worse than she had been led to believe. Edward confessed to Ellen that the letter about her mother's illness had been a ruse, a cover story to spare her a bit of humiliation. The truth was that her father had just gone bankrupt and was now on the run, hiding from his creditors. Financially ruined, her father saw only one hope for his now destitute family, which is where this debonair stranger came into the picture. Ellen must immediately marry Edward Wakefield, who would provide the financial settlement to rescue the family and ensure that the title of their estate would revert to her and not fall into the hands of Mr. Turner's heartless creditors. Ellen was shocked, understandably upset, and also deeply confused. As naive as she may have been, she also wasn't stupid. She told her would-be groom that she couldn't possibly marry anyone without first talking to her father. When Wakefield was able to produce a letter from Mr. Turner, in which he implored his daughter to marry their generous savior, Ellen at last reluctantly consented. Once Ellen had agreed to the marriage, Edward and his brother William ushered her off to Gretna Green to avail of the looser Scottish marriage laws. Now, I probably don't need to tell you that the Turner family's dire financial straits were entirely fabricated. Ellen's mother was perfectly fine. Her father was neither bankrupt nor on the run, and they would naturally be extremely upset when they learned what Wakefield was up to. So, you might be wondering, what's the end goal here? Well, Wakefield's plan seems to have been to keep Ellen away from her family as long as humanly possible, to give him a chance to win her over and force her parents into accepting the marriage as a fait accompli. But of course, even the best laid plans can go awry. And this was not a well-laid plan. Immediately after the wedding, Ellen, quite reasonably, wanted to go home and see her family. Obviously, Wakefield could not actually take her home, so he had to invent another lie. He promised her that they would go see her father, but first he must attend an urgent appointment in Paris he'd only just remembered. Not to worry, though. He would dispatch his brother William to fetch Mr. Turner to meet them in London on their way out of the country. Relieved that she would soon be meeting her father in person, Ellen accompanied Edward to London. When they arrived at their hotel, the men were not there, because of course they weren't. But William had apparently left a message informing them that he and Mr. Turner had just decided to continue on to France and would meet them in Calais instead. Edward Wakefield was at this point making up his plan in real time, essentially running a one-man improv show with extremely high stakes and a captive audience of one. And Ellen, who was now legally Wakefield's wife, who had been told her family's fortunes depended on her cooperation, who was a sheltered 15-year-old with no smartphone, no independent transport, and no way of verifying any of his claims, had no choice but to go along for the ride. The two crossed the channel and arrived in Calais, ostensibly on their honeymoon. It was at this point that Wakefield's plan began to disintegrate. Edward had simply assumed that the Turners would do what the Paddle family had done. That when they finally learned about the marriage, they would be so embarrassed and concerned about optics, gossip, family reputation, and whatnot, that they would ultimately decide that the public scandal would be worse than just accepting the marriage. This was, in retrospect, an extremely poor reading of William Turner. Mr. Turner was alerted to the abduction by Ellen's headmistress, who would become suspicious when no follow-up letter from the Turners or Dr. Ainsworth arrived. An enraged Mr. Turner immediately went to London to secure the help of the Foreign Secretary. He and his brother then sailed straight to Calais, accompanied by the family solicitor and a Bow Street runner. They had no trouble tracking the newlyweds down at their hotel. Now confronted with the actual Turner family and able to register the extent of their outrage, Edward dug in his heels. He insisted that since he and Ellen were legally married under Scottish law, she could not be taken from him by force. He sought the intervention of the French authorities and even appealed to Ellen herself, hoping that the adventure of the last few weeks had endeared him to her somewhat. But Ellen, now fully aware of how thoroughly she had been manipulated and deceived, recoiled from her abductor and tearfully begged to be taken home. Faced with the imminent collapse of his entire scheme, Edward Wakefield wrote out his sworn statement. Upon his solemn word, he swore that Ellen Turner remained Virgo intacta, that the marriage had not been consummated, that, quote, she and I have been as brother and sister. Once the statement was signed, he allowed Ellen to leave without a fuss. He then immediately wrote to his brother William back in England, informing him that the game was up. He advised William to get out of England as soon as possible, and then he himself fled to Paris. Warrants of arrest were issued for the Wakefield brothers, as well as for their stepmother Frances. All three were soon arrested, and Edward was extradited back to England to stand trial. Opening in March 1827, the trial was a national sensation. The Wakefield brothers initially pled not guilty, then changed their plea midway through the proceedings, apparently in some sort of plea bargain attempt to preserve the validity of the Gretna Green marriage. It didn't work. Both were convicted of felonious abduction and sentenced to 3 years imprisonment. Edward in Newgate, William in Lancaster Castle. Their stepmother Frances was released without charge. The marriage was annulled by special act of parliament in June of 1827. Wakefield filed a counter-petition opposing the annulment. From prison, he literally protested that his marriage to the child he had abducted should be legally recognized while he was sitting in prison for the crime of having abducted said child bride, which is like the height of delusion. Public opinion against Wakefield was savage. The Times described him as callous and concluded that, quote, nature does not often produce such a monster. Edward Gibbon Wakefield was, by every measure, finished, disgraced, done. Or he would have been done if he had been almost anyone else. Here's where the Edward Wakefield story takes the turn that makes him one of history's most aggravating case studies in failing upward. While imprisoned at Newgate, Wakefield read extensively. He developed theories about prison reform, about labor markets, and above all, about colonization. He wrote an anonymous tract called A Letter from Sydney, published in 1829, that proposed a new system of systematic colonization, in which colonial land would be sold at a sufficient price to maintain social hierarchies and finance the orderly emigration of free laborers from Britain. The tract was widely praised. The ideas caught on, and by the time Wakefield was released from Newgate in 1830, he was being courted by colonial reformers, parliamentary commissions, and government policymakers as a leading thinker on emigration and settlement. He was instrumental in the founding of South Australia, the colonization of New Zealand, and elements of British policy in Canada. His brother William became one of the early leaders of the New Zealand Company. The Wakefield family essentially became the architectural team behind the systematic British settler colonization of the Southern Hemisphere, a project that displaced indigenous populations on 3 continents and whose consequences continued to reverberate in the present day. Edward Gibbon Wakefield died in Wellington, New Zealand in 1862. He has streets and buildings named after him in multiple countries. The schools and libraries that bear his name generally don't lead with the part about the abduction of the 15-year-old. At the age of 17, Ellen Turner married a wealthy neighbor named Thomas Lee, this time by her own choice. In a very sad footnote to this ridiculous story, Ellen died in childbirth only 4 years after the trial, aged only 19. As absurd and even vaguely comic as it reads in some places, there's something infuriating about this story. That Edward Wakefield abducted a 15-year-old girl and manipulated her into marriage is monstrous. That he tried to legally enforce the marriage from prison is genuinely deranged. That he would go on to become a celebrated colonial theorist immediately after his prison sentence is wild. But what's really galling is the way the historical record itself participated in his rehabilitation. Edward Gibbon Wakefield is remembered today as a colonial theorist, as a reformer, and an influential politician. In his biographies, the Shrigley abduction is framed as a youthful indiscretion, an amusing misadventure, the catalyst for the unfortunate 3-year interlude during which he happened to develop his ideas about systematic colonization. One scholar in 1914 referred to the entire abduction as a primitive episode that historians should perhaps pass over in silence. Another wrote, with extraordinary chill, that Wakefield would never have developed his colonial theories without his time in Newgate, and that you cannot make an omelet without breaking some eggs. Ellen Turner was the egg. A 15-year-old girl was abducted, married off against her will, manipulated for 6 weeks, dragged across Europe, and lived just long enough to see her abductor released from prison before dying at the tragically young age of 19. And the prevailing historical assessment for over a century was that this was, on the whole, fine, because the man who did it to her went on to do important things. I find that more genuinely horrifying than the abduction itself. So yes, Edward Gibbon Wakefield is certainly toxic AF. But so is the historical apparatus that decided that he was worth forgiving.
What if vampires actually exist? And if they do, what would they look like today? One of the strangest vampire cases dates back to 1997, when a very unusual man was invited onto a TV talk show. He looked exactly like a real vampire, but the audience assumed it was nothing more than makeup and part of the act. Then he suddenly claimed that he was already 350 years old, and that's when things became even stranger, because he also said that his kind isn't afraid of sunlight, unlike the vampires you've seen in movies. His name was Don Henry, and he claimed that his fangs were completely real. And of course, he also said that he drinks a red liquid. Not human blood, only animal blood. But here's where it gets even stranger. During the show, he even took a lie detector test, and according to the show's lie detector test, the results suggested he was telling the truth. But that wasn't the end of it. After that interview, Don Henry disappeared from the public eye, and most people assumed the whole thing had simply been staged for television. But now, almost 30 years later, people have found Don Henry again on social media, and what many noticed made the story even more unsettling, because he doesn't just look like he hasn't aged. He actually looks younger than he did almost 30 years ago. And recently, more and more people on TikTok have been claiming to be real vampires, like Nick and his family, whom I talked about in another video, or the girl who claims she's over 104 years old, and many others. So what do you think? Do vampires really exist, or do they belong only in movies?
This is the case that I cannot stop thinking about. Now, there is a lot of information about this case online, and I highly suggest that you start looking into it if you haven't already. I'm not going to cover every little piece of it here, so please go research this more because we need more eyes on his case. This is Alonzo Brooks, and he was born on May 19th of 1980. He was the son of Billy Brooks Sr. and Maria Ramirez, and he lived in Gardner, Kansas. On April 3rd of 2004, Alonzo decided to go to a party in Lansing, Kansas with a couple of his friends. Now, this party was about an hour south away from Gardner, Kansas. When he rode with a couple of his friends, and I believe that there were 2 cars going to this party that were filled with a group of people. When they got to the party, they said that Alonzo was immediately involved in having a good time playing cards, like just having a good time at this party. But soon after, a couple of the guys decided that they wanted to go to another party, so they left. This is where the story starts getting a little weird. There was a friend that Alonzo was there with. His name was Justin, and apparently he went to the store to go get some cigarettes and left Alonzo there at the party. It is important to note that it did seem like there was a little bit of tension at this party and that there were some racial slurs being thrown around towards Alonzo. So why Justin would leave him at this party alone is very unclear to me, but either way, he goes to get some cigarettes, and when he comes back, he has some kind of like car issue where he's not able to come pick up Alonzo, and he calls Alonzo and says, "Hey, I can't come pick you up, I'm gonna leave." And allegedly he thought that Alonzo had a ride home, but he didn't. The next day, Alonzo's mother, Maria, realized that he wasn't home, and this was really unusual because Alonzo would always call home if he wasn't going to be there. He would always let his family know what was going on. So when she went into his room and realized he wasn't there, she immediately started calling people to find where he was, and nobody knew where he was. Finally, they went to the house where this party had been, and it was completely cleaned up. Like, it didn't even look like there had been a party the night before, and so they started getting police involved, but nothing was really done. Now, eventually, Alonzo's case would be given to the KBI, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, and they also did a search. Now, the entire property where this party took place was searched. Now, Alonzo's friend found his boot and his hat, and it looked as if someone had thrown them out the window while they were driving on this road, like over here. They thought that that's where they found the boot and the hat, but Alonzo was nowhere to be found. The creek up here, this whole place was searched, and nobody found anything. The team that came to search the creek, they said that the water was up about mid-calf, and they walked the entire creek and did not find Alonzo, but Alonzo's family was not able to search the property themselves. Finally, on May 1st of 2004, about a month after Alonzo went missing, his family was given entrance onto the property, and it only took them around 2 hours to find Alonzo. He was found in this creek. That's where he was found, even though it was searched extensively by the KBI. This is really sad. This is probably the hardest part about this whole case, but when his family found him, they said he looked like he was just sleeping, which is odd because the KBI would later come forward and say that he had been in that creek for about a month. This doesn't make a lot of sense because if you know what happens to a body when it's been in water for a month, this would make absolutely no sense. They did find his wallet, and obviously his clothes were on him. And inside the wallet, his mom makes a really interesting find. He had like a Hastings card and some money and all those things, and none of that was water damaged, which is weird because they're saying that he had been in this creek or in this water for a month. An autopsy was obviously done, and they did not find any signs of trauma on his body. There were no broken bones, no blunt force trauma, but there also wasn't any water in his lungs. So they could not determine what his cause of passing was, and his case was closed. Now, his family knew that this case was weird. Something was wrong with this case, and the fact that it wasn't investigated fully was incredibly frustrating, as it should be and as it still is. So then, finally, on June 11th of 2020, they did exhume his body and reopen the case. They also offered the FBI came in and reopened Alonzo's case, and they also offered a $100,000 reward for any information on what had happened to him. And that's pretty much it. I mean, obviously, like I said in the beginning, there is so much more to this case, and you can really dig deep into this one and find some theories. I have my theories, and I feel like I'll get in trouble if I say there, but that town knows what happened to Alonzo. The town knows what happened to Alonzo, and no one will ever convince me otherwise. Of course, allegedly, but somebody knows what happened to him, and honestly, I just feel like we need more eyes on this case because People don't talk about him enough, and he deserves justice and his family deserves justice. They have fought so hard for Alonzo, and my heart breaks for this family so much and I can't imagine not having answers. So let me know your thoughts on this down in the comments and follow for more true crime.
We are back with another Trini Paranormal, Trini Scary Story, Trini Folklore for you today. And I'm calling this series the Tobago Tales because I realize I'm going in and around Tobago giving you all the weird, cool, historical facts. Now we're here in Speyside, and as you would see in our background, you have a little Tobago. And next to Little Tobago, there's something called Goat Island. That small little island there with the big white house on the side. That's Goat Island. Now, if you look to the edge of Goat Island, you will see a very big mansion, and it was called the White House. And it is a mansion that is believed to have been built in the 1950s. Now, we don't really have much historical facts about when the island was bought and when the building was built, but looking at the West Indian style villa, it looked like it was built around the 1950s. Now, this villa was built by a very rich millionaire doctor, Dr. Russell, and he is from the US. And this was his vacation home and his private retreat. And it is said he used to come here very often to snorkel in the reef. So the island is in between Little Tobago and Angel Reef. Now, it is said that when he owned the island, none of the locals were allowed to step foot on the island. So it was just his private retreat alone. Now, afterwards, it was sold to someone called MacLeod. And then the THA would have gotten this island and the house for, I think it's 19 million USD. Now, the very cool lore about Goat Island is that it is said to have been a retreat for the writer of the James Bond trilogy, Mr. Ian Fleming. And it was believed that he used to frequent here very often and he used to snorkel a lot in the reef. So we don't know, we can't, verify if he really used to stay here, but this has been the rumor and the story for a very, very long time in Tobago. So when you come to Tobago, you'll see this beautiful piece of history there. We can't go in it, unfortunately, it is off limits, but tour guides tend to take you around the island. So yeah, if you're in Speyside, look out for the White House on Goat Island.
What are you waiting on? I know you see the ads, I know you see the videos. Register today for the Papa Boa Boat Virtual 5K where folklore meets footsteps. All you have to do is go on the link on our bio and click it and you can register. And if not, you can WhatsApp us at 283-0003 and we can give you more information on how to register. It is only $165 and you receive this beautiful Papa Boa Boat medal. It is our folklore character. It is very near and dear to our hearts. And you also receive a Papa Boa booklet telling you the story about Papa Boa. You also receive a player card and you receive some snacks in your goodie bag. So yes, register today for your limited edition Papa Boa Boat medal.
You talk to ghosts, you're going to hell. Hey guys, I'm Nikki and I'm a professional ghost hunter. I've heard things like this a lot, and I mean a lot. Now, some people see ghost hunting as devilish or demonic or witchy. I see it as research. Now, if there's one thing that I'm obsessed with, it's research. Now, not everything seemingly paranormal is true. Actually, a lot of things can be debunked. Most of these journals are just filled with me debunking ghost hunts. But there are a few that, as hard as I try, I can't explain. These stories are the most horrifying paranormal experiences that are completely unexplained. These are the ghost journals, and this was the first incident. I had no idea that this would change the entire course of my life. If you are easily scared, do not watch this series. But if you are a lover of all things spooky, stick around and go over to episode 1 of the ghost journals. After all, this is the reason I became a ghost hunter in the first place. Oh, and make sure you follow and turn on my notifications so you see the other one.
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me give you guys a story time of when my cousin dared me to take those things, the water inside the eye of the dog and put it inside my eye. And I thought nothing happened until I started seeing things at night. So fine. we like had heard from like the older people that when you take the thingies, the waters or whatever, when you rub inside of the dog and then you rub on your eye, you can see you can see wishes at night. And so my cousin was like, do you think it's real? This is my boy cousin, the one that I used to do things with. And I was like, I don't know, do you think it's real? He's like, let's test it out, right? So he acts like he puts it in, and I tell him, you're acting like you're putting it in. He's like, yeah, I'm scared, but you're not scared, right? And I was like, no, I'm not scared, but I'm a little scared. He was like, I don't believe you're scared. And then he starts pushing me, and I did it, y'all. Took the things off the dog and put it inside my eye. And he asked me, like, do you see anything? Because he held the dog down, and we kind of like did this, and the dog was trying to fight. We were bad kids. And so he asked me, like, do you see anything? And I was like, no, I don't see anything. Because I didn't really rub it inside my eye. I went like this, and then like a little bit inside. And I was like, no, I don't see anything. He's like, okay, walk around the house. We walked around the house. I see nothing. Fine. We forget about it, and at night I hear dogs barking, and I was asleep, but then these dogs were barking inside my dream, and then I eventually woke up. And then like something like pushed me to run outside, and I went outside because they leave the key, like we leave the key inside the keyhole, right? So I opened the door and I went outside, and I just looked outside, and baby, when I tell you, I saw shadows just running around. It was like swish, swish, like it was like, you know, when you see in the movies and they are flying cars, that's exactly what I saw. So I'm like, yo, what's going on? And the whole time I'm not even scared. So the dogs start barking, and then I go where the dogs are, guys. I was not scared. For some reason, I had courage like a dog. When I got there, there's this shadow of a woman, an old woman, that's holding what do you call this? A shadow of a baby inside her hands. She's holding the baby like this, and then she walks, and then behind our house, she digs, and then she puts that baby there, and then she closes it, and she's like, yeah, the people of, she said my surname, will not be able to like bear kids. So I don't understand how she couldn't see me because I was standing like this, and she's over there, right? So I'm confused as how she didn't see me. Fine. I'm just looking, bruh. There are people that are flying. There are people that are jumping in people's fences. And I'm so confused as to what exactly are these people doing. The following day, apparently I went into a trance that same day. I thought I was walking like with my body and myself, and I was walking as people, and I was seeing all of these things, and actually that was not my body, that was my spirit. I was seeing these things in spirits. How these people did not see me in spirits, I don't know. So apparently I had told people that I am seeing somebody that's behind the house and she's being a baby. They called my family members as like traditional healers from my mom's side. They called them and they started doing things, guys. They dug and they dug behind the house where I had told them, and they found baby clothes. And I was like, oh, okay. So obviously at home, like, they low-key believe that I'm a seer or something, and I'm none of that. I see nothing. I can't even see what's going to happen in the future. You understand? But that's what happened. And I was like, dang, like, I just found it weird. Like, I was young, y'all. I could not put two and two together. So yeah, that happened. Don't do what I did. I feel like, but this dog thingy, if you want to try it, you can try it, but I was told that only spiritually inclined people can see. Like, if you have the gift of prophecy, the gift of whatnot, you are going to be able to see if you do it. But if you have none of those, like, or you're weak spiritually, you're not going to see anything. But I would encourage that you see it, because what if you put it in there and you never knew that you were. Don't try things I wouldn't do. I did, but don't do it.
Let's see, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, but 7 victims at least. 25-year-old Maris Nichols joined the Douglas County school system in May of 2023 as a biology teacher. She accepted the job at Alexander High School and eventually became the head of the bio department at her school. Apart from being a teacher, she also took on a second role as the operations manager for the football program, meaning that she was present at practices and games, in contact with student athletes and their families, and embedded into one of the most socially central programs in the school. So she was very involved in the school because she wanted to be. But aside from that, Maris is also married and has a young daughter. Before starting her career, she graduated from Liberty University, which is a private Christian school, from my understanding, in Virginia. All that to say that from the outside looking in, Maris Nichols looked like a young teacher trying to still find her footing in her career and doing all the right things. But that's far, far off from who she really is, and the truth started to unravel because of a high school student. A teenager at Alexander High School, whose identity has been protected, came forward and told authorities that she had seen video evidence of Maris Nichols engaging in very very questionable, suspicious, alarming behavior with another student inside of their school. The report was made to the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, and luckily it was taken seriously because investigators acted immediately. Maris Nichols was 22 years old when she started her career, and only 3 years later, she was arrested. Search warrants executed as part of the investigation would reveal a digital footprint investigators described as extensive. Snapchat communications, videos, photographs, electronic devices, and school-issued equipment were all flagged as potential evidence. Warrants also revealed that Maris Nichols operated an account and that at least one of the students who had become aware of that account had used it to blackmail her into giving them better grades. But initially, the first allegations alleged that Maris Nichols had engaged in intimate physical activities with one of her students, not only inside of a vehicle parked in a driveway sometime between midnight and 2 in the morning, but also inside of a classroom closet, a closet allegedly that was shared between 2 different classrooms. That in itself was enough evidence for investigators to move in and arrest her, and they did so on the morning of Thursday, May 8th, 2026. She was arrested, taken into custody, and booked into the Douglas County Jail on 2 felony counts of improper contact by an employee or an agent, the specific Georgia statute that governs conduct between school employees and their students. She appeared before a judge and she was given a $40,000 bond with conditions requiring her to stay away from the named victim, the victim's residence, and the victim's family. She paid it and was released on bond. The Douglas school system also suspended her that same day. But authorities did not close the investigation after that May 8th arrest, because when it comes to cases involving digital evidence such as Snapchat conversations, video files, photographs, etc., investigators typically spend weeks, if not months, having to go through all the different accounts, all the different devices, because it's a lot and it takes a lot of time. So that's what they did, and what they found in the days following her arrest made it clear that those 2 initial charges were only the beginning. According to court records, Maris had just 3 days before her first original arrest instructed at least one of the teenagers that she had been messaging to delete their entire conversation history. Her instructing a minor to destroy evidence led to a tampering with evidence charge, but it also led investigators to realize that obviously Maris was aware of what she was doing. Obviously she knew that it was wrong and that she was trying to do what she could to delete as much as she could of her digital footprint. 12 days after her initial arrest on Wednesday, May 20th, 2026, the Douglas County Sheriff's Office investigators returned to the court with new warrants that would end in her getting arrested for a second time with many new charges. 5 more teenagers had come forward, bringing the total number of alleged victims to 6, at least 4 of who were enrolled students at Alexander High School, and at least some of whom were younger than 16 years old. A second judge granted her a bond of $74,000 with new conditions: full house arrest with a GPS ankle bracelet, no internet access including social media, no contact with any minor other than her 6-year-old daughter, a mandatory psych evaluation, and still not allowed to be having any contact with any of the named victims. All of her new charges were on the basis that she allegedly SA'd in some manner those 5 additional students, 4 of whom were boys, 1 was a girl, and 1 allegedly was also her own cousin who was a minor as well. The things that she was being accused of include, but are not limited to, Maris Nichols texting them describing what kind of acts she wanted them to perform on her, Maris Nichols encouraging them to watch the movie 50 Shades of Grey, Maris Nichols sending them videos and pictures of herself in which in at least one of them she was playing with a toy of sorts, if you're picking up what I'm putting down, and while she was doing so, she was wearing a Jesus Loves You sweatshirt. Maris Nichols hopping on live video calls with the students in which she also had toys present, Maris Nichols engaging in physical intimate activity with a different student in the back of his truck at a golf course. I mean, so disturbing. So she's arrested for a second time and she pays bond again and is released. And you would think that if you were facing this amount of charges, if you knew that every parent of every student at your place of work, your employees, etc., if the public is now aware of how disturbing and disgusting and messed up you are, chances are you would want to lay low. But not Maris Nichols, because investigators are now saying that while on house arrest in the 27 days that followed her release, she violated the conditions of her house arrest 85 times. Those 85 violations were broken down into 2 different categories: 38 home curfew violations and 47 inclusion zone violations, aka she did things and went to places where she was not supposed to be. The specific locations she allegedly traveled to included retail stores and fast food restaurants, so places that had no particular criminal significance on their own, but places that were outside of the boundaries of her approved activities and places where children were routinely present. On June 24th of 2026, 6 weeks after her first arrest, a Douglas County grand jury returned with an indictment expanding the case against Maris Nichols from 11 charges to 27, all based on essay allegations from Maris against her students in the months of January to May of 2026. Of those 27 counts, 24 are felonies and 3 are misdemeanors. The new indictment also alleged conduct involving at least 7 students, so 1 more on top of the 6 that were already identified. A grand jury arrest warrant was filed that same day, and Maris Nichols was taken back into custody June 25th of 2026. This time she was booked with no bond because she was finally seen as a danger to the community. She has pled not guilty and a trial date has not been yet set. Ugh. It's just like someone needs to, and she's a mom, but someone needs to check on her brain because I don't think that she's using hers. And I mean that in the most disrespectful way possible, honestly. Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on this. Let me know if you guys have heard of this and let me know your thoughts. But that is it for me today. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
Okay, I got a quick story. I just got back from the gym and I need to take a shower. But I figured I'd share a little brief story with you guys. So as some of you guys know, I am a cop. And part of being a cop is you deal with like death on like a daily basis. And a lot of times we get desensitized to it, unfortunately, but this occasion, it kind of sat with me for a while, and so we'll get into it. I was dispatched to a welfare check for a suicidal subject, and yeah, so the family couldn't get a hold of them, and so I was dispatched to go to the location where they were last known and, you know, try to make contact. And anyways, so I did everything I could trying to find this person. You know, called a bunch of numbers, called a bunch of people, went to a few places. I couldn't locate them, and it was a really, really, really busy day with like a lot of like hot calls, as we call them, like a few domestics and this, that, you know, it was a crazy day. So I did everything I could to try to find this person, and if you're in law enforcement, you know, if they're not a danger to anybody else, you know, they are a danger to themselves, but I couldn't locate them. Nobody else was in danger at the time. So I put out an ATL, an attempt to locate for a suicidal subject, and, you know, check welfare and contact me if you make contact with this person. And then I had to go take more crazy calls for the day. And then I get a call a few hours later towards the end of my shift for shots fired. And as you can guess, it was my welfare check. And when I got that call, it was 2:13 in the afternoon. So fast forward to that evening, when I got home, I went to bed. And then I guess another thing that kind of bothered me is I knew this person prior. I've had previous involvements with them, you know, so that kind of bothered me too. So anyways, I go home, go to bed, and I wake up at 2:13 in the morning. And at first I'm just kind of like, that's weird, but you know, whatever. Continue on with my week, but then every day, sorry, I broke my nail today and it's really bugging me. So throughout the week, every night, I'm waking up at 2:13 in the morning, every night. And it was so weird that I told my friend Liz, if you watch some of my previous videos, Liz was my ex-roommate and now she lives in Louisiana. And we talk because she moved on to like a plantation that has some spooky stuff, and so we share like spooky stories, and I'll share some of my crazy cop stories with her. And I told her about this like 2:13 thing in the morning because it was like starting to bug me. And she, you know, she's like, oh yeah, that is kind of odd, you know. And so anyways, we wrap up our conversation. And the next day she calls me and she's like, dude, you're never gonna believe this. And I'm like, what? And she's like, I woke up at 2:13 in the morning. And I'm like, that's crazy, because I didn't. And then she let me know a couple nights following that she woke up at 2:13 in the morning, and that was just so weird. So my daughter Riley came home for the weekend, and I think she's kind of like me, where the paranormal is attracted to her. And so her dad's house, she's got her own situation going on there. And if she wanted to share some stories with you guys, I'll let her. But yeah, so she's dealing with her own paranormal stuff. So she'll come home and tell me like, oh, this happened and this happened, you know. And we'll kind of share stories if mine aren't too scary here, you know. And I told her about the 2:13 in the morning, especially because it was no longer happening to me. And so she thought that was kind of weird, and just went on, you know, with her night, and we watched a movie or did whatever we did for the night. And then she went to bed, and she wakes me up that night, and I didn't even have to check the time. And I look at her and she's like, Mom, I woke up at 2:13. And it was like, by the time she was in my room, it was like 2:14. But I was like, oh, you know, I try to like, okay, it's okay, you know. So I put her back to bed, and then the following few nights after that, she woke up at 2:13 as well. And I didn't wake up at 2:13 after that, but I just thought it was really strange that I tell somebody and then it like carries on to them for like a few nights following. That was really weird. And I have one more about a welfare check, and I've got a couple other spooky calls that I'll tell you guys about. But second one is, again, like, you deal with a lot of death in law enforcement. You just do. And a lot of times it's like older people that pass away in their home. And this one wasn't even my call. I just responded to help the responding, like the initial officer. And it was an older gentleman who like died alone. And whatever, help them with whatever they need on the call. And then I go home as per usual, you know. And I'm like in bed, going to sleep. And I wake up in the middle of the night. And there is a man in my room. And he has like an older man, and he has like a bucket hat on, you know, like a fisherman's hat, bucket hat, and like a thicker jacket, and he's like a more heavier set man, kind of the same as the man that we responded to. And he's just kind of sitting at like the edge, like not sitting, but like standing at the edge of my bed, just kind of like looking at me. And I just like look at him, and I like go to like wake up my husband, like nudge him awake, and I like, as I'm doing that, I like look over and he's gone. And I never saw him again after that. It was just the one time, like he just, I don't know, it was just there, and then he like never came back again. So that was weird. That was the 2 welfare checks of mine that kind of ended up weird. And I've got a couple more stories I'll share with you guys soon.
This popular influencer that posted content on positivity and relationship advice has recently been arrested for trying to hire a hitman to murder her ex-boyfriend. This is an extremely recent and ongoing story. So many people were asking me to cover this, and the second I started reading about this case, I was shocked. Gabby Gonzalez grew up in Florida. She was very close with her father, Francisco Gonzalez, who was a successful and well-off attorney who will be very important later. Gabby Gonzalez really liked traveling and surfing. She started posting content about this on social media when she was 14 years old and started to gain quite a following. But she would really gain a large following after she started dating a celebrity in 2018. And that guy was Jack Avery. Jack always loved music and songwriting and singing, and when he was 16 years old in 2016, he joined a boy band with 4 other boys called Why Don't We? I've actually never heard of this band, but apparently they were huge. A lot of their songs on Spotify have hundreds of millions of streams. They worked with Ed Sheeran for a bunch of their songs, and their debut album even debuted at number 9 on the Billboard Hot 200. This is actually a pretty big deal. For context, Sabrina Carpenter's debut album debuted at 43, and Taylor Swift's debut album debuted at number 19. So the fact that they hit the top 10 with their debut album was huge.
So listen to me.
And they would go on their first arena world tour the following year in 2017. And while on his world tour, Jack Avery and Gabby Gonzalez met in person for the first time and started dating when he was 18 years old and she was 16. It was a really cute, teenage relationship, and because Gabby was dating this pop star, when they went public, she started gaining even more followers. Now she had almost 500,000 followers on Instagram, and she would have like 100,000 on YouTube and 400,000 on TikTok. And then only a year into their relationship, when Jack was 19 years old and Gabby was 17 years old, they found out that Gabby was pregnant, and they would welcome their daughter Lavender into the world. Unfortunately, right after Lavender was born, Jack and Gabby were just fighting all the time. They're very young parents, they're teenage parents, they're under a lot of stress, and they would break up before Lavender's first birthday. And what followed was a very messy custody battle. Gabby almost immediately moves to Hawaii, and she takes their daughter Lavender with her. She goes to the court, allegedly trying to make up a bunch of lies about Jack, about what a terrible person he was and what a terrible father he was, because she wanted to have sole custody of their daughter Lavender. Meanwhile, Jack is doing everything he can at the height of his career to be with his daughter. He was always flying to Hawaii to try and see his daughter, but once he actually got to Hawaii, Gabby would ghost him, so he couldn't see Lavender. Gabby's father, Francisco, even gets involved in this custody battle. He hires a private investigator to try and dig up dirt on Jack. But when the PI can't find anything on Jack, Gabby and her father, Francisco, start planning different ways to get Jack out of the picture. Eventually, they settle on the best thing to do would be to have Jack murdered. Gabby has a new boyfriend in Hawaii named Kai Carter, and Gabby fills Kai's head with a bunch of lies about Jack. So Kai will help Gabby murder her ex-boyfriend and her daughter's father. And at this point, everyone in the situation is so young, minus Gabby's father. Jack and Kai are both 21. Gabby's only 19 years old, planning a murder. Gabby, her father Francisco, and her boyfriend Kai are in a group chat trying to plan Jack's murder. Kai claims that he's familiar with the dark web and he can find a hitman on the dark web to murder Jack, and Gabby's father Francisco allegedly offers to pay for this hitman. Francisco transfers $14,000 to Kai, and Kai uses this to buy crypto so he can pay for the hitman. Kai then goes on the dark web under the screen name Lizard King 69. He goes on a hitman website, he finds a hitman, and he pays this hitman the $14,000 to kill Jack. But this wasn't a hitman at all. It was the FBI. Kai even speaks with the hitman on the phone, and he says, "We want Jack Avery killed. He's this member of this boy band." Kai says, "My girlfriend and Jack's baby mama is the one that wants him killed, and we have this lawyer that's willing to pay for everything, so the FBI knows everyone that's involved in this plan to murder Jack." And this is all happening in like 2020, 2021, by the way, if I haven't mentioned that yet. 2 FBI agents go to Jack's house and tell Jack that someone in your life tried to hire a hitman to kill you, but they don't tell Jack who it was for over a year while they're trying to build their case. So for over a year, Jack is just paranoid because he knows someone in his life is trying to kill him, but he has no idea who it is. He wiretapped Gabby's phone, recording all the conversations that she has with her father and with Kai, still trying to have Jack killed, even a year after they tried to hire this hitman and were ghosted by this hitman. It's actually so crazy that Kai is still trying to help Gabby murder Jack, because at this point, Gabby and Kai aren't even dating anymore. Gabby is actually married to a whole different guy named Cody at this point, and still Kai is helping her plan how to kill Jack. November 2022, Gabby's home is raided by the police and the FBI. They take all of her electronics. This is the first time that Gabby realizes that she's in trouble. It's also the first time that her new husband, Cody, hears about any of this. And Cody and their live-in nanny actually both go and talk to the FBI and turn against Gabby. The nanny allegedly overheard conversations Gabby had about wanting to kill Jack, and her husband Cody overheard a bunch of conversations about just like how obsessed she was with her ex-boyfriend Jack and how much she hated him. But at this point, the police don't think they have enough evidence to actually make an arrest, so years go by with no new developments. And eventually, Gabby thinks that she's in the clear. Like almost 5 years go by and she's never arrested, so she's just still posting on social media like nothing's wrong. She's a full-on influencer. She posts a bunch of videos about being a mom, living in Hawaii, about being positive and like this hippie lifestyle she lives. She also posts a lot of videos about like dating and relationship advice while she's actively being investigated for trying to murder her ex-boyfriend. And then just a few weeks ago on May 15th, 2026, Gabby Gonzalez, her father Francisco, and her ex-boyfriend Kai were all arrested. They were arrested on charges of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and hiring a hitman. And because of Gabby's followers, she has like almost 1 million followers across all platforms. Gabby's mugshot goes omega viral online. I'm sure all of you have seen it. Her estranged husband, Cody, actually posted her mugshot on his story with just the word karma. And following Gabby's arrest, Jack was awarded full custody of Lavender. Unfortunately, at first, Lavender was really mad at Jack. I can't even begin to imagine how many lies Gabby has told Lavender about her father, Jack. Gabby was released on $2 million bail, but she can have no contact with her daughter Lavender or with Jack. Kai's bail was also set at $2 million, but he could not make his bail, and he's actively trying to have his bail reduced. And there are talks that he might take a plea deal and testify against Gabby. Gabby's father, Francisco, was denied bail, so he still sits behind bars. There's also another investigation out against him, and it's very likely that he will be disbarred very shortly. All three of them will be back in court on July 23rd to officially put in their plea of either not guilty or guilty. This case is still ongoing and will very likely be a very long process, I guess, depending on what they plea. But if they are found guilty of all charges, they're facing 25 years to life in prison. I'm so interested to hear all of your thoughts on this case. I'm sure at this point, a lot of you guys have seen the mugshot, but how much of this did you actually know? I'm so interested to hear all of your thoughts and opinions on this case. But while you're in the comments, please always remember to be respectful because there's a little girl in this case, Lavender, and also be respectful for Jack as he tries to develop this relationship with his daughter. While you're in the comments, I'm so interested to hear what case you want to see me cover next. Thank you to everyone genuinely that suggested that we cover this case, and I will see you guys all next time in my next video. Please be a good person to your fellow person.